Kat, thanks so much for joining me in the studio. Obviously for the Security Space podcast. So, what we're discussing today is off the back of your idea for obviously what you discussed at DTX, Tim. Obviously, a lot of people are talking about AI and they're saying it's this problem and everything like that, but that's it. They're not actually explaining what these problems actually are. They're sort of moving forward. So, where should we start with that one then? So obviously there's lots of problems.
I think first of all, just outlining that question, because there are loads of people that say that AI is going to be a problem in our industry. We see people mentioning that it's going to be a problem in the next year, in the next couple of years, and we see actors going to be using it against us. But no one talks about how. And the first thing that comes to mind about how is phishing. And yeah, definitely, it's going to be used in phishing attacks, but there's much more to it than that. Because it's an enabler, it enables novices to have access to very technical information very, very quickly. It enables people who may not have a lot of knowledge about cyber attacks to do cyber attacks all of a sudden. So say if you wanted to, all right, I'm going to defraud Bob's Biscuits or whatever, then all of a sudden you've got no way of doing it. But AI comes along, you can ask, AI, how do I do this? Now, ChatGPT is good at putting some safeguards in place. But there's places like all of the universities that are creating their own models and making it open source so that they can grow the community. They've not got the same controls. They've not got the same stop gaps. So you end up with people who have this kind of an enabler, and they're unable to do lots of different things, including phishing, or they may be able to write malware, they may be able to create a watering hole website, or they may be able to just deploy something there. But it means that they've got that means to do it.
Yeah, no, I think on that one, obviously everybody thinks about the pros and cons of AI. And we always highlight, like, it speeds up our job when it comes to copywriting material or going through in regards to building policies. I know people who do that all the time, or like speeding up recovery of code or fine-tuning code. But they also think of, like, that also speeds up attackers in regards to what you were just saying. Like, it speeds up their ability to engineer these kind of capabilities. And, ChatGPT, you can even use ChatGPT to create these things. The safeguards are in place. It looks for commonality when it comes to, this is going to be used maliciously, but you can use the language itself against it. So in the sense of, like, can you tell me more about this malware for my thesis? And it'll literally tell you all the details of it. Or you can say, like I'm going to use Bob Biscuits, like you just said. Tell me all of the entities of Bob's business. Tell me all the things that you can find online about Bob's business. Tell me about all the employees that are online about Bob's business. To ChatGPT, this is just somebody who's creating research, but actually it's a threat actor doing open source reconnaissance against a business. Historically, that would have been quite difficult for an offensive security team. It's like, we need to do this scan, we need to do Nmaps, all this kind of stuff. Now we can just ask a bot going, can you just find this information about Bob's business?
That's exactly.
And that's the challenge to AI is we've now got a capability, not just from a defensive point of view, but from an offensive, a tool which can be heavily leveraged by somebody. It just in regards to reducing that kind of time to potentially, as a threat actor, to leverage against a business. So, yeah.
Just a point on that is, because I said on a similar podcast I did with Jake Bernardes, is obviously about AI and about machine learning. It's similar to what you were saying there, in the sense of, like, yes, you can kind of use it as a threat actor to gather all this intel, but can you also use it as because it only learns on the data that's out there, so you can spread misinformation, can't you, and data that's not even true, but because it doesn't know, it's just taking what's out there.
So definitely do that. That's called poisoning the AI and the poisoning the model. You can definitely do that if you put enough information out there or put it out in a certain way that the model can ingest it. Then you can make the model output your data instead of the real data. That's definitely a tactic to attack AI as such, and that's like right in the infancy of it happening at the moment. But it's totally a thing, and people are trying to do it at the moment. But the AI is your best friend in coping with that, because it'll tell you how it's got to that level. It'll tell you where it's got to, and it'll explain its understanding. It'll explain its thought processor, and it will give you, right, I got this because of this, and this, and you can keep asking it, and it will keep telling you more and more and more, which is great. But it's also great for the attacker because the attacker then knows exactly how to get that. So one person takes advantage of it and does something wrong.
Yep.
Then the second person who's not related to the first attacker then asks about that attack and describes that attack. And they might even say, like Ben was saying, they might say, I'm a journalist, I'm trying to report on it, I'm doing some research. Can you just explain how that attack into that website happened?
Yeah.
They'll give you exactly how it works. And it's hit and miss with the ChatGPT protection anyway, which is the only protection I've tried to circumvent. But you can ask it one time and it'll say, no, I'm sorry, I'm just a model and I can't do it. No, sorry. But then go back and ask it 10 seconds later, same question. And it goes, oh yeah, sure, here you go. So you've got this kind of attack vector of getting past the safeguards by just doing it again.
Or tailoring your question, like you said, if you can say, I'm a journalist and X, most of the time it will come back with a response. So there's add-ons and there's plugins to ChatGPT. Now you've probably seen all of the top 10 tools for AI and stuff like that across loads of different languages, and all they're doing is plug it into ChatGPT and tailoring a question to bring out a response. And I think one of the challenges there, just to kind of really kind of go into what you mentioned there, Nick, you know, if you've got a very niche technology and you're like, I'm going to poison this particular response, that could be a line of code that people don't really understand. So I'm going on ChatGPT. There's this niche technology. I'm trying to learn it. I'm gonna go on ChatGPT because I need to deliver this quicker. I need to get this out there sooner than what's expected. They will just put it into their website. No questions asked because they're going to trust what ChatGPT puts out. There could be a line of code in there which is a C2 beacon out into the internet. Nobody knows, and you've just deployed something of malicious intent into your code just because you're trusting the output of ChatGPT. And I think to go full circle with this, because we're very much focused on business side, but there's also from a citizen, as somebody, as I guess a public servant of the internet, somebody who I go on all over around the internet, as somebody who I'm now thinking like businesses are now starting to leverage this, like how they're going to use my data, how are they going to share this around, how am I going to interact with ChatGPT, how am I going to use that, what about my kids, all these kind of things. Now I'm thinking like, I think we've heard of horror stories in schools now of people foraging like essays and material. When does it stop? And I think this is not just a cybersecurity challenge. This is a society challenge. But I think what we need to recognize is it's not just a security problem. This is a big problem, and it's so infant. Nobody really knows. And I think this is one of the things that I really want to get out there is we need to start asking these challenging questions. Going, how do we want this to work? Because it's got widespread implications, not just security, but as a society as well.
Oh no, definitely. I mean, I'm not sure if you saw the news story a couple of weeks back. There was a lawyer in America who based his entire case on ChatGPT. He did all his research on ChatGPT. Now, the problem with ChatGPT, for those that are not aware, is it will tell you the truth until it needs to fill in that word space and it doesn't know the truth. Then it will make it up. So this lawyer did all of his research on the case on ChatGPT, and he had a number of false accusations in his subject that he submitted to court.
What's the thought process behind making it up? Is it like the most likely to be true? What's the code behind that?
Well, the way that the AI works is it's a large language-based model. So it gives you language that it thinks is appropriate in that situation.
Right.
So in that situation, it's appropriate to talk about the company that made that thing, and it's appropriate to talk about the thing, and it's appropriate to give how many horsepower the thing has, or how much electricity the thing uses. But if it's not got it in its database, it still needs to do that because its language model says, I have to give these stats.
Yeah.
Well, it gives the stats anyway then. Yeah, it will justify that as well, because in a language situation, you would justify that it can use that much electricity because X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
So not only does it give you the false information, but it gives you what looks like very authoritative information that thinks it's correct.
Well, that leads nicely to what I wanted to say on Ben's point, in the sense of like, this seems like to the everyday man something that like should be locked away. It shouldn't be open source. Maybe like NASA's using it or something like that. Do you know what I mean? But it's like, because it is open source, and for people that aren't in the cyber industry, like say it's a society problem, like they don't understand the threats, and like I say, they might be fooled by the authoritative words, the instructions, which is the solution. Not just to take it off open source.
I think the challenge with it is it got released into the public domain very quickly, and not many people really understood how to leverage it. So that's why you've seen constant fear-mongering around AI and what it can do, and it's the end of society, it's the end of the world, because people don't really understand and they go to those conclusions. They're thinking like iRobot and stuff like that. But then I think we've only really had OpenAI in the public domain for a year, and that's a short period of time in the grand scheme of things. And I think from my point of view, people are still trying to understand what we can do. I think it has major benefits to society, but we also have to understand the controls. There's no controls around it right now. Apart from this, like Tim's mentioned, some barriers when it comes to real, very obvious stuff, such as I want to make something of harm to, and it's going to harm somebody else. It detects these things, but it's very easy. You can circumnavigate them, especially if you know like the English language or whatever it may be. You can get around it just by adding a string of text to it, and you get the response. I think there needs to be more education, and this is the challenge. You could literally go online, register ChatGPT, and you're on it. Mm-hmm. There's no education, there's no repercussions, there's no about this misinformation. Like Tim, you mentioned, we could create two businesses in the same area, has no idea about my business. Tim, you've created a biscuit company, and it's going to go, because we're in the same sector, it's going to start filling the blanks because they know about me, not because they know about Tim. And then it will speak on a, like they know a lot about my business, but it's like, actually, I understand, no, it's just making these conclusions based on information. And this is the challenge, is it will start, and this is the challenge with ChatGPT, is it will start making conclusions and you will believe it, especially if you don't understand it. Yeah. And I think that's where we need to start focusing a lot of our energy is around education, understanding this isn't the truth, or it might bend some of the rules around it. So take it with a pinch of salt. And this is where you hear people like, oh, it's going to replace my job. It isn't, because you'll always need somebody to sanity check what's going out. And my fear is at the moment is none of that kind of gatekeeping or sanity checking when it comes to kind of what material's coming out of ChatGPT. Like code. Oh, I'm just going to put that in my website. Boom. Oh, you're not even checked. You're not even spot checked. No quality control. Yeah. And that's where I feel like we as a society need to focus. I think it's out of Pandora's box now. You're not going to put it back in. Mm-hmm. But what we need to do is now need to recognize it's out of the box. What controls can we put around it to protect the future of education? The big one. Misinformation, the big one last year, and it still is big this year. Like, what can we put around it? I don't know what the answer is, but I think there has to be some kind of intermediate control before you even get into the platform. Like, I hate using like terms and conditions, but something like that, when you have to understand like this isn't the truth, and like don't always trust the information coming out of it. These kind of ideas, I think like is super important. But to your point, Nick, you're not putting it back in the box.
No,
I think it came out too soon because we just wanted to play around with it. And I think it's taken a life of its own, really. But now we need to go, it's out of the box. What we're going to do about it to kind of protect ourselves, really.
I think we probably need to just explain about that. So ChatGPT is owned by OpenAI. It's not open source. It's a closed source product. They're giving it out for free at the moment, and that helps them develop the product further.
Right. Yep.
So everything that you put into ChatGPT helps ChatGPT understand what people could possibly put into any system. It understands more about questions. It can already do answers. It doesn't understand questions very well. And that's what it's learning at the moment. We're teaching it. And the more it understands about questions, the better questions it'll be able to pose to us, the better answers it'll be able to pose, and then it grows and grows and grows. What's also happening at the same time as this is that Stanford University are doing a lot of work. They've created a model, and it escapes me the name of it now, but they've created a model that you can download, and that is open source. That can only do a single question effectively in the models that I've seen, but it does it very well. It can't compound questions, so you can't ask a question about a question. You have to ask a brand new question. And there's other ones out there that are becoming really, really good. Google's got one, and there's AWS is using a whole host of them, and they've got some really great systems that you can get off the shelf now. But there is a whole industry starting with AI, but it's starting without any governance. Like Ben says, it's got no way of saying this is doing it wrong, because no one set what wrong is. And it's got the potential to harm people's grades, harm people's livelihoods. If your data gets put into a language model, then people can ask everything about, maybe Mary's data gets put in there and it's got a bra size in it. Then everybody will be able to ask, what's Mary's bra size? And it'll tell them, is that right? Should personal data be able to be put into a model? There's these kind of questions.
And how much do we want to trust it? Imagine if, I don't know, we asked ChatGPT at some point, self-diagnostics.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to ask ChatGPT, I've got these symptoms, tell me what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
We're then going to trust this data, and I'm going to go to the pharmacist and get this medication.
Yeah.
Like, these are the implications. It's not just,
Yeah.
and this is why I wanted to focus, yes, it's a cybersecurity problem, and yes, there's loads of opportunities, and yes, there's a lot of fear-mongering, but there's even bigger implications than just security. There's, like I said, there's medical, there's education, there's critical infrastructure, there's things that make our life go around.
That's right.
And if we start just ignoring the governance side and just go free rein it and hope it figures itself in the end, like, that's a bad place, because it might start, you know, ChatGPT, OpenAI, all these models are going to start ingesting this data, and it could be wrong, and we're going to start trusting it. And I think this is where we need to, some kind of disclaimers or something around the controls going. You have to. I imagine it's going to get better. There's very, very smart people on it, like you said. There's universities and, you know, massive companies like the Googles, Microsoft, Amazons are now investing so much money into this because they can see the potential. But if we don't figure out the governance side of it, it's just going to be free reign. And I think if you've used ChatGPT to, like, the rigor, I guess, me and Tim have, you start seeing it inaccuracies in data. You start seeing the challenges with this. So just going full circle is, yes, there's also the risk of, we're now putting information in ChatGPT, and we're like, I don't know, what if I put, I don't know, I'm going to use an example. I'm building my own house, and these are the security systems I got in place. These are the windows. This is my layout. This is where I am. That data's in ChatGPT. Then, I don't know, my neighbour's going to do the same thing, and then all I know, there's a massive layout of my whole neighbourhood on ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Everybody has access to that.
Yeah.
And these are the things that we need to start thinking about when we're building systems, talking about, like, anything in regards to putting data in. You have to remember everybody has access to that now.
Yeah.
It's not just locked away in a vault going, that's just Ben's data. ChatGPT is going to start looking at my inputs going, oh, this might be valuable for Tim at some point, so I'm going to keep it somewhere. And Tim might ask the same thing going, tell me the structural integrity of Ben's house. Oh, happened to Ben put it in a couple of days ago, here you go. And then Tim goes, the whole layout, my floor plan of my house, ways to get into my house, my key layout. I don't know, it could be anything. And this is the challenge is we need to govern the data input, not just the output as well.
I think it's much more nuanced than that, because someone might listen to that kind of example and think that it would be that obvious, but it's not. It's much more nuanced. So over a period of maybe 4 or 5 years, you asking questions about your house means that ChatGPT gains a rich knowledge of your house. You know, you just asking, oh, right, if I've got this wall and it's so thick and I've got this window here, could I put a door here? All right, that's one question. You know, in a couple of months' time, you say, right, my roof's at this angle and it's at this inclination to the sun and all that kind of. Can I get solar panels? Right? You say the more you put in there, the more bigger picture it has, and that bigger picture enables it to answer other questions. So it's not necessarily that all of a sudden you would put a plan of your whole house in. It's something that happens over a long natural period, just like you would do when you're talking to your friend. If you make a new friend and you talk to them for 10 years, by the 5th or 6th year, they know exactly where you live. They know details about your family. They know what kind of car you drive. They know where you like to go on holiday. Well, if you're asking ChatGPT the same kind of thing, it learns organically in the same way.
But is that not? Does it though? Because like, in a sense of like, it only knows as much as you said. Because like you might, I don't know, you might completely tear off your roof. Say you've had a leak and you need a complete new roof, but that data is still there. So it's only like, it only knows what you've told it, doesn't it? It can't adapt. But that's the worry.
But you asking questions that your house is involved in. So if you suddenly start asking questions about solar panels, then it'll probably make the assumption that you've got solar. If you start asking questions about how would I charge my car, then it knows you've got an electric car. If you say how far is it to the local train station, it knows you get the train. If you say, right, how much can I take on the plane? I'm going to this place. It knows you go to that place on holiday. So it's really nuanced, the questions that it gets. And remember, with Microsoft, this is in your browser now. So everything you type in your browser is going into ChatGPT. Everything you type in, and think about the things that you type in your browser. Some of them are not probably appropriate for this conversation. Certainly not for me. So it's got all that information. It's gathering more and more and more. So that becomes kind of a risk in its own right, because that at some point that data might not, but it might become available to other people. And there's no guarantee that the company gives about that. In fact, if you read the terms and conditions of ChatGPT, they tell you it will come out with other people. They inform you about it. You've agreed to it. No one reads it, but you have. So you've got not a leg to stand on.
Precisely that. And I think one of the things which just to go nearly full circle on that one, is the power of ChatGPT is it's able to join the dots really, really quickly. And to your point, yes, you could tell a friend and they might not who it's related to. You could be these loose clues and all these kind of riddles. ChatGPT is like, it will be able to join up dots. And then if you think about from a business point of view in cybersecurity, if you're starting to put your code into this tool, if you're starting to put your, God forbid, please don't do this, but your employee information in ChatGPT, it's going to then start joining up dots going, oh, Bob works in accounting. Oh, they just put in this thing, and then that's the power of ChatGPT. It's able to join these dots, and this is the model. You hear model all the time when you think of OpenAI, ChatGPT. That's what it refers to, and this is why the power of ChatGPT is getting all this rich open source intelligence from the open web, and then joining those dots. That's why it's really powerful. If you just ask it like about a historical event, it will give you a full timeline of everything because it's joining the dots really, really good. And if you think about like the house example, it might just need one bit of information to join all the other dots. And that's the scary thing is you can't really control that from a human perspective because that's AI. It's able to do this number crunching much quicker than anybody else can. So that's I think the big fear for it all is like that.
But just going back to the risks that poses. So the fact that you've got this AI model that's able to create this massive web of knowledge about anything, you can either let the company have that model or you can have your own, because you can ask it questions yourself and you can build that database up. So if you figure out a very sensible set of questions about a company, so what's their web presence, how many IPs have they got, what software do they use, what do their employees do, how many people are in finance and all that kind of stuff. Remember, with ChatGPT, it's if you install a lot of tools, and I'm not going to tell everybody what kind of tools to install, but you can install an API set that will allow ChatGPT to go out onto the internet and acquire this information. And you can actually have it self-reference the question. So you can say, can you create a set of steps that would get me so that I was being able to be employed in their finance department? And it would go until it was confident that it had got you enough information about the company and the skills that you'd need to be employed in that finance department. Now that's a real attack. Yeah, you've got a potential malicious actor in your finance department who's got an enormous amount of knowledge. He's well briefed. He's got all of the skills that he needed to get because it's worth his investment. If he spends 10 grand on training so that he can get that job, then he might play the long game. If he spends 10 grand to get that job and then gets that job in a couple of years, then walks away with a couple of million and never to be seen again, he's done well, hasn't he?
Yeah. Here's a question. Let's just say hackers. Are they not just the pre-existing embodiment of what the dangers of ChatGPT have been? Yeah, ChatGPT is just an enabler. All of the AI is an enablement.
Yeah. That's all it is. It just enables the unskilled to become very, very skilled.
And its capabilities have been around for a long time. You know, when we talk about what Tim's was referring to, anybody could have done that prior to ChatGPT. What it's doing is it's speeding up that process for delivery of this information. Before you might have needed 5, 6 different kind of capabilities, techniques, tools, or whatever it may be, to collect that information that Tim's referring to. And that could have taken months for an organized group of individuals, hackers, so to speak, to collect that information. Now, I can create a string of questions in an AI, and it will just package it up in regards to...
You could ask AI to do it for you.
Exactly, and this is where a lot of companies are leveraging it when it comes to threat intelligence. So now, from a defensive side, because we focus a lot on the offensive side, on the defensive side now, you can then start asking ChatGPT going, package me up a threat intelligence report based on all this information. So a defensive team now has this, but everything defensive can be reverse engineered from an offensive point of view. And that's the power of OpenAI. It's not going to completely revolutionize new techniques. It's just the enablement of these techniques to be leveraged much quicker, and that's the fear to it all.
I think you're totally right. I totally agree with what Ben's saying. You're right there. But if anybody's going to use any of the AI models for defensive capabilities, pay for the AI model. Pay for it. Get the contract. Read the contract. Talk to them. Explain what you're going to use it for. Make sure that the data that you're putting in isn't furnishing the criminals with the very data you're trying to repair. or protect.
So
Yeah.
it's a great disclaimer. You don't want to be literally giving the ammunition to an offensive security engineer because it's like, oh my god, you're just giving it on a plate. But yeah, you're completely right. But this is why it's quite an interesting field because yes, from an offensive security point of view, it feels like we're scaremongering a bit, going, oh my god, everything's going to be open. But actually, from a defensive point of view, think about vulnerability scanning. I'm just going to use a few examples. Vulnerability scanning, historically, you'd have to install scanners in your network, you have to do external pen testing, all this kind of stuff. It's lots of money, and for a small business, it might be really difficult. Now, you can potentially, like you said, go to a company going, can you create me a report in regards to all my endpoints on the internet, all the most critical vulnerabilities, prioritize that list of vulnerabilities based on exploitability, tell me how to patch it, tell me what I need to do, boom, packaged up what you need to do. So you actually can leverage this from a benefit. And this is why, like, OpenAI, yes, there's this scary side of it, but it's also a benefit.
Oh,
like,
definitely.
Like, this is the thing, is like, how, and that's I think in security we do it really well. It's risk versus reward kind of thing. It's like, oh yeah, there's this risk of all this stuff going on, but the reward of it actually is you might not need to employ an army of security professionals now. You just need a very specialist few to ask an AI to help you out, or what it may be. But I think that there's so many opportunities from a defensive point of view to really start using these models, hopefully commercial models, like you said, to help speed up the delivery of defensive capabilities. Because every organization now, I don't know about yourself, Tim, but it's so hard to stay on top of everything. You know, there's new 0 days every day. Yeah. And this is where AI really comes into it. A 0 day in the future probably won't exist because you just, there's this new vulnerability that's come out, no such thing as a 0 day. You just give it into an AI and it's like, oh, this is what you should do. And it's like, all right, okay, cool.
Yeah, totally. We at Slater and Gordon, we grew through acquisition. So we've got a lot of systems that we're merging into one kind of thing. So that means our vulnerability landscape is quite wide instead of quite narrow, you know. So we have to concentrate on trying to reduce the software titles so that we can manage it. And I'm really looking forward to the addition of ChatGPT to Defender, which is happening in the next couple of months, I believe.
Yeah.
And that will enable us to be able to see what kind of attacks are possible on our environment if they were chained together. So someone would be able to get in through this server, then they'd be able to traverse to this server. They may be able to take advantage of the permissions in this database. Then they'd be able to do this. And what the AI will do is it create all these paths throughout the environment and say, this is the worrying one. The rest of them we think you can stop by just putting ASR rule here, or make sure EDR is locked down on this, and make sure that there are no permissions on this, make sure you're using laps, all the basics. Normally the basics are the fix, by the way. But in many businesses, the basics have been changed for a business purpose to achieve a goal. And what this Defender will do, it'll highlight why that's a problem. And then it's a case of risk acceptance, or, you know, it's a case of trying to reduce that risk. But at least it furnishes the blue team, the defense cyber team, with that ability to go to the exec and say, I know you really needed this project done by next Friday, but if we take another 2 weeks and spend another $2,000 on it, it'll be totally secure for the next 10 years. And it's that kind of conversation that you really need to have, because they won't be bothered about it unless you can give that justification to them. And this is an enabler for the blue team kind of thing.
Yep, absolutely. Just one last question for you both. Do the cons outweigh the pros?
For me, yes. I had to say that hesitantly because I'm actually a really geek of AI and the possibilities. For now, yes. I am worried in regards to if the governance isn't addressed soon, the implications on society and the things that we hold dearest in regards to personal information, how much we truly believe when it comes to misinformation. But for me, I think the benefits far outweigh the cons if we do things properly. And I think we've got all these AI models have real bright people at the top who understand the consequences of going too far down the avenue of no governance. But honestly, nobody can really predict where AI is going. I'm always in this geek mode going, oh my God, this will be possible at some point. And oh, this is going to really help everybody, you know, not just personally, like I can just ask it. It's like OpenAI or ChatGPT is just a new search engine to me now. It's like, oh, I can just ask it a question. Like we just talked about DIY before. It's like, oh, before I might go through Google, I have to go through forums of information. Like I don't even know what the hell I'm reading. This is horrible. I can just, I've got this problem. Can you give me a list of articles and stuff to help me speed up my discovery and my knowledge? boom, you got all the information there. So I'm just thinking of it from that point of view. But yeah, I'd say from my perspective, I think it's the pros far outweigh the cons, but there's a lot of dangers upcoming. I would say in the next couple of years if we don't sort out the governance side very soon.
I totally agree. I think that we need to sort out that governance, and that governance is a safeguard for society, not just for UK citizens or American citizens, but the world needs to solve it. Because it's no good if they say, all right, well, we'll have these rules in England. Well, all right, well, we'll just move to Germany and do the other thing then. You know, it needs to be a global consensus. And the problem with that is a lot of these tools have been made open source and the genie's out of the bottle with it. So there's always going to be bad actors. There's always going to be that kind of challenge. But I think if we've got some kind of governance, and I would go further than governance, we need training. There needs to be training at high school level about this. It needs to be at high school level because it needs to be ingrained in society. And if it's not at high school level, you end up with a situation where no one knows, no one understands it. So it needs just a little bit of knowledge at high school level that will trickle through everybody's understanding for the rest of their lives.
I agree, and I think the dangers of AI needs to be well understood. People think it's just a little bit of data out there. Actually, implications are much bigger than just a little bit of data out there. Yeah. It could have, we talked about misinformation a lot on this, and I think that's a really good example. Every single society is going to have a different culture, and that misinformation could be leveraged against a country. I don't know. I'm going to use the Russia-Ukraine stuff at the moment. Russia could then start putting data in ChatGPT to discredit a lot of stuff coming out of Ukraine.
That's right.
And this is the danger of it, and this is where we need to then show the dangers of using these models. Because at some point, ChatGPT, this is the fear of it, it could govern itself.
That's right, yeah.
And then how does it know what's right and what's wrong? This is where does AI have a conscience at this point? Yeah. And that could go, that's another hour conversation about consciousness of AI. But yeah, I think education is crucial, understanding the implications, but also the benefits to this point, and taking that a little bit further and educating at grassroots, like in high schools, even maybe sooner than that, because it's going to be in schools. We've seen it in universities already.
It's already being used.
It's heavily used, and I think we need to educate not just in education, but in business. Every single area of society needs to be educated on this stuff. Not just fearmongering, but in the sense of like the opportunities for I guess society really. So,
and I think when you're ingesting AI content, it should be labelled. In my opinion, it should be labelled. If the content that you're reading was created by AI, it should say it. If the content you're experiencing on YouTube, so many YouTube videos now that are AI, it's horrible. Yeah. Then you should be told. Cambridge Analytica used machine learning. That's been published and stuff, and they have changed governments, including ours. You know, they've actually changed governments. So yeah, this can affect society, and unless we start waking up to the reality of how far-reaching it is, then you end up in this situation where we just walk into the future, which is quite scary. We need to be open-eyed, engaged with it, and we'll be okay.
Well, Ben, Tim, I'm truly terrified. Thanks so much. But once again, thanks so much for jumping onto Screw Space. Obviously, if anyone has any questions, I'm sure you will. I'll be sure to put out Tim and Ben's contact info so you can obviously ask them any questions that might be raised today. But once again, chaps, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. Yeah, thanks for having us.